Hello everyone and welcome back to Towergate. It is Towergate day number 535, 535, August 31st, 2018, Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. My. Unbelievable. The last couple weeks, man, it's just like almost every day. There's just more and more, incredible evidence coming out. We're learning so much, in fact, as I'm going out and filling out my timeline, every night or every other night when I get around to it, I'm finding myself, obviously there's new things to put in there from the current time, but I'm finding myself going all the way back into like 2014 and 2015, 2016 and filling in gaps about things that we didn't know then that we know now. So I try to put that in my timeline in there. And so it's been quite busy keeping up with my timeline just because I'm having to go back a year or more and either correct things, change dates, add things to what's there, things like that. So it's a lot of information coming out, a lot more clarity. There's still a lot more to know, but it's just amazing. The last couple weeks, we've really had a lot of things coming out. So before I get into tonight's Towergate headlines, I just want to talk a little bit about a kind of a controversial thing that's going on right now, which I really don't like to see with YouTube and various websites. There's a lot of this controversy about who interviewed or did not interview Bruce Ohr, and a lot of people are getting really excited about this and really crazy about it. And the thing is, we shouldn't get all tore up over this, because the fact is, here in a week or two, they're going to release the transcript and we'll know exactly the question that was asked to Bruce Ohr about who had interviewed him. And we're going to get to see his answer. There'll be some redactions, I'm sure, but for the most part, I expect we'll get a pretty clean documents on this Q&A with Bruce Ohr from his deposition. And we'll know exactly what Bruce Ohr said about who has and has not interviewed him. But in the meantime, I don't like to see a lot of fellow YouTubers who I like Tracy Beans. She and I may have a different view on this. You've got the Conservative Treehouse, Last Refuge. You've got PJ Media. You've got Gateway Pundit, the Daily Caller. All these sites that are good sites, have good reporters, and there's slightly different variations on this because of, I guess the information, the way it's coming out, it's a little confusing about exactly who Bruce Ohr was or was not interviewed by. But it's not such a major deal that we need to be like getting all tore up over it. It's just it's an important issue, but it's not worth getting bent out of shape or anything like that. I mean, it's just there's a lot of different information coming out, and so I think what happened was, I believe it was Jim Jordan who came out and said essentially, we asked Bruce Ohr and he said he had never been interviewed by Bob Mueller. Okay, never been interviewed by Bob Mueller, and you can find that in the Daily Caller, the Gateway Pundit, PJ Media. Roger Simon covered it. You've got Paul Sperry. So you've got various really reliable people who have been very reliable in the past, certainly saying that this is true, that this is what happened, that Bruce Ohr said he was never interviewed by Mueller. But then you had Joe diGenova, and there may be other people out there who come out and said, yeah, and Huber has not interviewed Bruce Ohr either. So then you had his wife coming out and saying that, well, Huber was supposed to be looking into Uranium One, but she knows for a fact he has not interviewed her client, William Campbell. Now, on that issue, I think we can be pretty sure Victoria Tensing is telling the truth, because that's her client. She represents Mr. Campbell. If the IG or Mr. Huber or anyone else that interviewed Mr. Campbell, she would certainly know about it. She's his attorney. She would be the one that would be working out the details there. So I think we can be sure that Victoria Tensing, unless she's lying, which she doesn't have a history of lying, if she's telling the truth, and I believe she is, then Mr. Huber has not interviewed Mr. Campbell. It's hard to imagine why. He would be the most important witness. He was the inside informant for the FBI. He would be one of the top people you would interview first if you were investigating Uranium One. So at this point, we can assume that that's pretty much true. As far as whether Mr. Huber has interviewed Bruce Ohr, there seems to be some confusion on that point. But we're going to find out in about a week or two. The transcript's going to come out and we'll find out. Maybe Joe diGenova was just assuming that. Maybe he's got some information. Maybe he's talked to someone. I don't know. But anyway, there seems to be a lot of commotion around this, and it's not really necessary. It's not worth getting worked up over. There's too many other things that we're learning, and there's too many other things we have learned that are important, and we're going the right direction. Things are all happening, and this detail is going to be ironed out probably within the next week or two. We'll know. Now, I'm pretty darn sure that the IG has interviewed Bruce Ohr on, at least, if I'm correct, 13 different notes or memos of interviews between the IG and Ohr. And I guess a lot of people are saying, well, if the IG interviewed Ohr, then therefore Huber has it, because Huber is there to work with the IG. But then again, there's the other, rule of thought, which is that, well, no, because actually Huber was brought in to interview people who no longer work at the DOJ, because Horowitz can't interview those people. So that's why Huber was brought in. And does it mean just because Horowitz is interviewed Huber, or interviewed Ohr, that Huber was automatically present, or that the IG made that available to Huber? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. No one knows but Mr. Huber and the IG and Mr. Ohr. Maybe Mr. Ohr. Probably Rosenstein knows. Maybe Sessions knows. Very few people would know that. We just don't know. So the best thing to do right now is just, the fact is, I'm telling you, Joe diGenova and a few other people are saying that Huber has not or did not interview Bruce or Nellie. Mueller has not interviewed Bruce or Nellie. That's what the majority of these people are saying. But they could be wrong. We'll just have to wait and see, and we'll find out here in about a week or two when they release the transcript, and we'll find out exactly who has or has not interviewed Bruce Ohr. The important thing is that we know who has interviewed Bruce Ohr, and it's Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Darrell Issa, and all the rest. And he'll likely be interviewed again. And they're going to interview a lot of people where they learned a lot of things from Bruce Ohr. That was a devastating interview. They verified some things that are very problematic and will lead to more interviews of more people. And the most important of those revelations, and that I think, or the two most important, are that Bruce Ohr told them that yes, there were at least a half a dozen other people at the FBI, other DOJ people, who knew he was funneling the dossier information to the FBI, and they knew his wife worked for Fusion GPS. That is major. That is major, because that implicates at least a half a dozen other people, high-level people, probably above Bruce Ohr, at the FBI and DOJ. He also said that they used the dossier despite the fact that they had questions about its credibility. That too is a major, major issue. Those two things, and they probably learned a lot more. Those are major revelations which are going to lead to more witnesses, more questions for other people, bringing back some other people they've already interviewed and getting more questions from them. So, I mean, again, this is whether or not Mueller or Huber or whoever interviewed Ohr, we're going to find that out in a couple weeks or less. And we'll put that to bed. But in the meantime, we're pretty sure that Mueller has not interviewed Ohr, and that tells us a lot. We know the IG most likely has, because we have like 13 memos of interviews we assume were done by the IG or someone on his staff. Whether or not that was shared with Huber or not, who knows? We don't know that. But diGenova and some others say that that's the case. We'll find out. No use getting bent out of shape over it. It's just one of, when you're following a story like this, you're getting so many sources with unnamed sources, various different versions of it. This is a very complex story with a lot of people trying to cover their ass, a lot of people trying to get scoops. There's going to be some information that comes out that's not correct. Maybe it's accidental, maybe it's on purpose, who knows? But the only thing you can do is go through the information as best you can, put it out there, and for the most part, since I've been doing these Towergate videos, I would say about more than 95% of the things that are initially reported have turned out to be true. There'll be little variations just because of the way these things work. When you're getting leaked information or things like that, you're going to get differences in how it actually ends up, being stated in an article or on a YouTube video or something like that. So there's going to be discrepancies, but the meat and potatoes of it is right on the plate. You know. So everybody just calm down, and we will find out here in the very near future the answer to that question. And how important it is, I don't know. But we'll be finding out. So just hang in there. It's all good. Now, let's go to the most recent bombshell. Again, this one from Sarah Carter. So, Sarah Carter has now learned that, in fact, we've been talking a lot about Michael Flynn and how very early on it was Stefan Halper who was the one who ratted out Michael Flynn. And back in 2015. Back in 2015, Michael Flynn had attended this London Center at Cambridge, and he had found himself in a conversation with this woman who we were told was Russian. We found out now she's Russian, but she's of Russian descent, but she's actually a British citizen. And she's one of these think tankers and belongs to a lot of these groups, goes to these seminars and does all this sort of stuff. She's an historian as well. Okay, so Michael Flynn ends up in a conversation with her, and the next thing you know, Stefan Halper reports on this to the GCHQ, British Intelligence, and they pass it on to the CIA, John Brennan. So we knew that, and we've known that for a very long time. It's been on my timeline for over a year. But now we're learning that it was, in fact, Stefan Halper who invited Michael Flynn to that conference, and not only that, made sure that he was seated right next to this Russian national female. So there we go, another setup. Halper invites Flynn to Cambridge, to this London Center, makes sure that he is seated next to this woman who's a British citizen of a Russian descent, or who's a Russian national but is a British citizen. Make sure that they're seated right next to one another, and then he files a report with British intelligence saying, yeah, this is kind of sketchy. Michael Flynn getting awful cozy with this Russian woman. That makes its way back to the CIA to justify what will later become probably one of the reasons that they were able to investigate Michael Flynn and eventually catch him in a perjury trap. So here we have Mr. Halper, we now know, invited Flynn to the London Center at Cambridge to set him up, just like he invited Papadopoulos to the London Center at Cambridge to set him up, just like Halper invited Carter Page to the London Center at Cambridge to set him up. And who else hangs out there at the London Center in Cambridge? Well, it's a bunch of spooks, foreign policy wonks, foreign diplomats, people like Christopher Steele, who was there that night, along with Mr. Halper, the fat man, Mr. Breedlove, who's a very close friend of both Halper and John Brennan. He was there. Mr. Mifsud, Mr. Downer. Of course, we know that Madeline Halfbright was one of the keynote speakers that particular evening when Carter Page was attending that on the invitation of Mr. Halper. So what does this tell us? It looks like this London Center in Cambridge was a place where they would invite all these various type of think tankers and academics from all different persuasions, including Russians, several different Russians that they would have come to this London Center at Cambridge. The perfect place if you wanted to set up some people to make it look like they were colluding with Russians. You would invite them there and then make sure that they get a seat right next to one of these Russians, so that you could then pass on an intelligence report and say, yeah, well, there's Carter Page sitting next to a Russian having a conversation. Oh, there's Michael Flynn talking to this Russian. Oh, there's Papadopoulos hanging out with the Russians. It looks like this is the place where they would do their traps, set their traps. I mean, this is not a coincidence. Stefan Halper invites Papadopoulos, Carter Page, and Michael Flynn to the London Center at Cambridge. Then he files intelligence reports saying that they're colluding with Russians. This all gets back to the CIA. And who's Mr. Halper working for? Essentially the CIA and the FBI. This is obvious. It's very, very obvious. Somebody needs to drag Mr. Halper off his farm in Virginia, or whether he's in Cambridge or wherever the hell he is. This guy needs to be drug in and questioned. He's no longer protected as a confidential informant. He wasn't a confidential informant. He was an operative working on behalf of the deep state, U.S. and British intelligence, to set traps. He was an agent provocateur, setting traps for members of the Trump campaign team to entrap them to affect a U.S. election. I don't think that qualifies as a confidential informant working on a criminal investigation or something like that. No, this is him being part of a coup. Him being part of a frame-up of a presidential candidate in a presidential election. Working for the deep state. The FBI, the CIA, British intelligence, who knows, all of the above. He doesn't enjoy the privilege of being a confidential informant. And his name is out there now anyway. They need to drag Mr. Halper's fat ass in for questioning. Immediately. He's obviously at the root of this thing, going back to the very beginning, long before Operation Crossfire Hurricane. He filed this report on Flynn in the fall of 2015. Mr. Halper needs to sit down and answer some serious questions. The Cambridge Cabal. There's a lot more to learn about that, I'm sure. Now, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, Victoria Tensing says that Huber has not contacted her client, William Campbell. And she says that the Uranium One issue was one of the issues he was supposed to be looking at. We can assume she's telling the truth. Whew, wow. It appears that Obama, Biden, and Bush are going to be the three people who've been chosen to speak at the McCain funeral. Obama, Biden, and Bush. What's wrong with this picture? Huh. I'm surprised he didn't ask Lois Lerner to come and give a speech at his funeral. He should. After all, it was Senator Magoo who sent his right-hand man, Mr. Kerner, over to Lois Lerner's office with details on how she could screw the Tea Party. What technique she could use to put them out of business using the IRS. That was Magoo's right-hand man, the head of his staff, Mr. Kerner, who went over and told Lois Lerner how to take down the Tea Party groups, who didn't like Senator Magoo, and Senator Magoo hated them. Maybe Lois Lerner should have been the keynote speaker at Senator Magoo's funeral to explain how closely they worked together to put the screws to the Tea Party and to help re-elect Barack Hussein Obama for a second term. A lot of help from Senator Magoo there as well. And who's going to be the keynote speaker? Obama. You don't have to be a mathematician to add that one up. Hey, the conservative treehouse is now posting a link for Towergate at the bottom of their stories. Now, the link isn't going to take you to my channel, but what they're doing is putting my link in there so that when you click on it, it'll take you to conservative treehouse stories that I have commented on or I have used as a reference in my videos. Pretty clever. But now someone over at Conservative Treehouse at Leastways knows about Towergate. Clearly, I'm now on their link list. Here's a very good question a lot of people are asking, and I'll ask it for those of you who haven't heard it. Maybe some of you have the answer to this question. Why did the FBI need Ruth Orr to give dossier information to the FBI when Steele Chrissy Steele was giving the dossier directly to the FBI and indirectly through the State Department. Now, the obvious answer to that question is, well, because the FBI had to fire him because he leaked to the media. But that really doesn't add up either now, because we know that the FBI was paying him. Even after they fired him, they were still paying him. And he was moving that stuff through the State Department. He was funneling it back to Fusion GPS. He was funneling it to Bruce Orr, who was passing it along. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems here. And when this all gets sorted out, my oh my, a lot of people are going to need good defense attorneys. Trump is winning the war on trade. He is winning on judges, and he is winning in the primaries. In the past couple weeks, he's 9 for 9. And I think he's 9 for 11 or 9 for 10 overall. He's getting lots of judges nominated, and he's just kicked the crap out of Mexico and Europe on trade. Canada will fall probably within the next day or two. They will concede. And then the toughest cookie to crack here is China. But they'll fold too. Just a matter of time. Trump, again, with his tweets, they're deadly. Trump is now calling on the FISA judges to call in Comey, Yates, McCabe, and Rodenstein and press criminal charges for lying to the FISA court. And he's calling out Judge Collier by name. Well, I know Bassman or Baseman, however he pronounces that, has been on this for seems like several videos now, pointing out the fact that these FISA judges had to be corrupted. There's no way they could be that incompetent or that easily duped. And I agree. I mean, there's no way that these FISA judges could have been that naive. A lot of other commenters have said the same. Patty and other people. Everyone's noticing this. When you look at what we're learning now, at what they withheld from the FISA applications, what they knew, I find it very difficult to believe, and especially the FISA court judges, they signed off on the same crap 4 times. You're not supposed to be able to do that. Each time you get one FISA warrant, you get information which is supposed to give you more information which should show up when you request the second one. If the first one did not produce more information, then why do you need a second one? They're supposed to have a reason to go for a second. You don't just automatically get a FISA warrant and then you get never-ending FISA warrants after that just because you got the first one. You're supposed to. There's actually a process here. And it's clear that the process was not just violated by the FBI and the DOJ, the FISA court itself. And you have to ask yourself, well, all 4 of these FISA court judges and the head, Judge Collier, were they all duped? I'm sorry, but there's just no way, man. There's no way that they were all duped. There's something going on here. Something bad is going on here. And Trump is absolutely right. And when you got the President of the United States calling out the head judge of the FISA court and saying, hey, you need to drag Yates, McCabe, Rodenstein, and Comey in here. You need to find out why they lied to you. And you need to press criminal charges for lying to the FISA court. That's what the President is saying here. And he's damn right. Well, we had such a busy week this week, and I had so much going on in the beginning of the week with work and all, and so many stories dropping, I didn't have time to get to Dumbass of the Week. But we need to do Dumbass of the Week. And our good friend Peter up in the Great Northwest has suggested that Lanny Davis be the Dumbass of the Week, and I cannot argue with that one bit. Absolutely. Here we have this A-hat. This asshat. I had to watch this guy back in the 90s. I was sick of this guy back in the 90s. He's just as obnoxious today as he was back then. I used to love listening. Every Friday on G. Gordon Liddy's show, he used to debate Lanny Davis. It was funny as hell. But anyway, so here we have Lanny Davis. He's going on CNN as a confidential source, okay, that they don't reveal. Then he comes on and they question him about information from the confidential source, which was him, and he responds to it, okay? He comes out and first of all, he says, that leaked something that Michael Cohen was definitely in Prague, and they can prove it. That turns out to be false. Then he says, as a leaker, says, yeah, and they got proof. Cohen was in the meeting when Don Jr. and Trump talked about the tower meeting, the Trump Tower. Now he's had to come back and say that's not true. Not just that, but he's actually had to state that there are 13 references to Michael Cohen in the dossier, and he now says those are all false. So at the same time that he's the lawyer for Michael Cohen, he's also the confidential source of CNN. Then he comes on to comment as a commenter, commenting on the confidential source, which is him, which he gives out false information about the very person he's representing. Yes, Peter, he is the dumbass of the week. No question about it. And CNN still hasn't. They're sticking with the story. Everyone else has debunked it. Even the Washington Post has called him out. That is Trump derangement syndrome to the max, man. Chuck Ross of the Daily Caller. Misfit emailed the FBI on February 11th, 2017, just after he was interviewed by investigators. He downplayed his contacts with Papadopoulos. Misfit said that there was nothing nefarious in his dealings with Papadopoulos. So, if Misfit did not tell Papadopoulos about Russians having dirt on the rotten Reverend Clinton, who did? And did Downer just make all this up? Down the hatch Downer. If so, if this is true, then why would Papadopoulos tell the FBI that Misfit told him that the Russians had dirt on Hillary? Somebody's lying. There's a problem here. So what happens is Misfit is here as a special guest invited by the State Department to come and give a speech here in the U.S., I assume in D.C. or Maryland. Gives the speech, in which time he gets questioned by the FBI. And he tells them, hey, I talked with Papadopoulos about foreign policy, about oil, energy and natural gas in the Mediterranean, and we talked about, European matters, but we didn't talk about anything to do with cybersecurity or about hacked emails or leaked emails or anything, or dirt on Hillary or we didn't talk about anything like that. But he said, I'll check my notes just to make sure. So after the interview, he goes back, he looks, I assume, at his computer or whatever, and goes to his notes, and then he emails the FBI back the same day. So, okay, I've just looked in my notes, and just what I told you earlier this morning is true. I have nothing that I can find, that I can recall from any of our conversations, me and Papadopoulos, where we ever talked about any of that stuff. We were talking about other things, foreign policy, Europe, and things and such. Well, somebody's lying. Papadopoulos says it was Misfit. Why would Papadopoulos say that if it weren't true? What's Misfit's deal? Did he say it or did he not? Or did Downer make all this up? Is Downer lying? Did Papadopoulos even say anything to Downer about Russians having dirt on Clinton? Every one of these people need to be brought into open hearings. The three of them. Sit them right down. Say, okay, there's three of you. You all three have a different version. Now let's find out which one of them is true, if any of them. We also learned from Chuck Ross at the Daily Caller that Sergei Milian, another source of the dossier, who Papadopoulos also had contact with, we're learning now that Sergei Milian offered Papadopoulos $30,000 a month to spy on the Trump campaign. He offered $30,000 a month to Papadopoulos to spy on the Trump campaign. Where was the $30,000 a month coming from? Who's got that kind of loot? Mr. Milian doesn't. He's a con man. He's not a billionaire or even a millionaire. Who was it that was going to provide Milian with the $30,000 a month to pay Papadopoulos? You're probably talking, 3-4 months that would have went on, maybe longer. You're probably talking 150, 200 grand that would have had to change hands. Who was going to be paying that money? The rotten reverend from her George Soros fund? Another guy that needs to be drug in and interviewed. Everybody. You got to bring all of them in, man. Sit them down at just a big long table and just go right down the line. And if they lie, take them out and shoot them. The Rotten Reverend Clinton was joking about the Chinese hacking her homebrew illegal unsecure private server. There was actually an email where someone says something to her about, some anomaly with her email, and she laughs or jokes about it, says, yeah, it must be the Chinese. So is that why the Rotten Reverend Clinton deleted 33,000 emails? Because she did not want it known that these 33,000 emails were now, many of them containing classified information, top secret information. Was it to protect her? Because if those 33,000 emails would have been discovered, and then it would have come out that the Chinese had them, that would have been almost a slam dunk that she would be indicted for violations of the Espionage Act, mishandling classified information on hundreds of counts. The University of Illinois is about to honor Obama with an Ethics in Government Award. Let me say that again. Some of you just spit your coffee right all over your computer keyboard. Sorry, I should have warned you. University of Illinois is about to honor Obama with an Ethics in Government Award. Trump says Sessions is safe in his position as Attorney General for a couple more weeks. Trump has canceled pay increases for federal employees. He knows that they don't vote Republican, right? Federal employees are getting their pay increase canceled, and he said there won't be one on the ballot for next year. He will not be looking at one for next year either. So federal employees, obviously no fan of Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump obviously repaying them with a nice little surprise. No pay increase this year or next. Good. These people were paid far too much in pay and benefits. Compared to the private sector, it's been out of whack for a long time. You have bureaucrats making well over six-figure incomes with benefits for life, pensions for life. It's ridiculous. It's about time. The left is calling for a boycott of In-N-Out Burger because they donated to Republicans. That is absolutely pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. We've got to the point now with this Trump derangement syndrome that if someone donates to the political candidate of their choice or political party, they now have to be boycotted for exercising their right to participate in what we do here in America, which is vote for one of the two or three or four or five parties. Participating in democracy, what? We're not allowed to disagree anymore? We all have to vote for one party or we get boycotted? This is getting stupid and dangerous. My favorite story of the day right here. Reality Winner. Many of you remember her. She just got hit with a 5+ year prison sentence for leaking classified information. She leaked to The Intercept some information about an investigation into some Russians who were hacking a software company in Florida who made software that is used by counties in their election systems. They make software for elections. And the Russians allegedly hacked into it. There was an investigation into that. Reality Winner leaked this to The Intercept. She's doing 5+ years. Well, Trump came out and he tweeted out that he thought that was unfair, that the Rotten Reverend Clinton could do all she did. She gets nothing, and Reality Winner, this 26-year-old young person, gets 5+ years and has her life probably ruined. Now, keep in mind, she was a hardcore anti-Trumper. Hardcore. Her Facebook was full of hate-filled posts about Donald Trump. But he came out and said something nice about her, and Reality Winner is now saying, quote, "It's been vindicating but also frustrating to watch the Russia investigation play out behind bars." But she's thanking President Trump, thanking the very man she despised. Now she's thanking him and saying it's frustrating to watch the Russia investigation play out behind bars. She said that she and her family were prevented from using the word or the phrase, "that is unfair." Trump did use the phrase, "it's unfair what happened to her." She says her and her family were told they weren't allowed to say that. But Now Trump said it, and she's thanking him. You think she's on the Trump train? Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow for more Towergate. You guys have a good night. Take care. Bye.